Welcome, everyone. I'm Sandy Welton, and I am the current chair of the board of NCCS. I have a few people that I want to speak to especially, and I will go through that briefly. First, I want to say thanks to John Stovall, Helen's husband, and their son, Jonathan, and his wife, Brianna Black. They have so generously shared their family with all of us, and from the heart, we all really remember you with a lot of love. Ellen, though she was at often work away from work from you, was always talking about you. I feel like John's one of my best friends, and we've probably spoken 20 words. So that's all due to Ellen. And I also understand that there are a good number of other family members who have traveled from San Francisco, Boston, New York, Pennsylvania, and pardon me if I leave anyone else out. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you very much for being here. I've got to say, I've been on this board 12 years, and you would think I would know a lot of people in this audience, and I don't, which really says something about Ellen and her circle and how wide it extended. The woman, you knew her, she was one of your best friends after the first conversation. And you could not wait to keep that friendship going. And I can only imagine that there's about 100 people for each of us here who wish they were here. Now, I have been given the dispensation of a few more minutes for a special reading. Now, I must say also, I think Ellen would love, Ellen just was pretty straightforward about evidence-based medicine. And I think this is just a great place for this event. She would smile at this, I like to think. I want to share with you a letter that it's just been shared with me, and it is addressed to the Stovall family at their home address. It is signed by the Vice President, Joseph Biden. And I might say that as a sign of the difficulties with Congress, Joe could use a better ribbon on his typewriter. I could use some better eyes. And the type, it's just, we won't get into the font, but I'll do my best. To the Stovall family, dear friends, it is with great sadness that I join you today in mourning the loss of Ellen Stovall, a beloved mother, spouse, daughter, sister, and a true champion in a fight that so many around the world face. It is far more appropriate, though, to join you in celebrating the life and work of such a champion. We all know someone who has had cancer or is fighting to beat it. Ellen's long-fought battle demonstrates the perseverance that we encounter in so many survivors, but her battle did not end with remission or even survivorship. Ellen continued to fight for change in a system that needed refocusing, placing the patient at the center of cancer care and research. Her vigorous embrace of this cause and unwavering courage in the face of a difficult challenge has given millions of patients, survivors, families, the hope and the comfort they deserve. Ellen Stovall undertook ambitious goals with great leadership and integrity. A moonshot to cure cancer is only as good as its fiercest advocates, and in Ellen, we will remember these heroic qualities that truly set her apart and inspire us to persist in the fight. Ellen made it her life's work to ensure the most important voices aren't lost in the mix, and from personal experience, I know how important this is to all survivors. Her legacy is one of genuine, tangible results that positively transformed the way cancer care is delivered. As we work to solidify a global commitment to end cancer as we know it today, let us do so with Ellen's sense of purpose and priority. Sincerely, Joe Biden. A few other groups that I would like to thank and recognize. One being the founders of NCS. That founding occurred in 1986 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I believe we have three of the original founders with us today: Susie Lee, Barbara Hoffman, and Dr. Fitzhugh Mullan. We also have numerous and current board members who are current and former with us. I want to thank those board members for their hard work to help Ellen, and thanks to all who have worked beside board members and the board chairs to do the work of NCCS for patient survivorship. Two of those original founders are our first speakers. Barbara Hoffman has been on this board, well, since its inception. It's about 30 years. You might ask, how can someone be on a board 30 years? Well, I worked closely with her. She was our governance committee head. So among her many contributions, she wrote the rules. And we remain very glad that she is still on the board. Fitz Mullan will speak with Barbara. I've always heard of Fitz. Fitz this, Fitz that. He's been this mythological figure, part of the folklore of NCCS. I understand it was Fitz who first called for an alumni association for cancer survivors. And so here we are. I would love to share with you some wonderful Ellen stories. We all have them, but my minutes are up. So with that, I will turn the program over to Barbara and Fitz.
We are going to be a bit of a duet. 30 years we've been rehearsing for this, so it's going to be pretty good. But between us, we're going to try to kind of set the stage. Both of us have worked with and loved for all this time, Ellen and what she's done and stood for. So with that, we're going to start with, if we can get this right, this indeed is a picture of the founders. This is the fall of 1986 in Albuquerque, coming together around this notion. I don't remember when we first started using the word survivorship, but a number of us had been free of cancer, or at least functional post-cancer, and worrying about why nobody talked about the reality of the experience that we had. And that brought us together to form an organization, the NCCS. Early on in the organization, we were in Albuquerque, but we decided in 1990 to move to Washington for any number of reasons, the leading one of which is I think we conceived of ourselves as a policy-related voice of the patient, and of course this was policy central. But moving our rather frail office, our very much startup NGO from Albuquerque to Washington was a challenge, and clearly we needed leadership. We had Kathy Logan, who would run the office in Albuquerque. She wasn't moving. So Ellen had become involved in a Greater Washington Coalition for Cancer Survivorship, which a number of us had been involved with, and clearly had the kind of interest, the kind of capability, the personality, the smarts, and the dedication that it would take. At least that's, as I remember it, that was clear from the start. So we turned to her, and she said, thanks, but no, I have a job, and I'll be happy to be supportive. I'll even help you do the selection process. So we went through that, and flawed as we were, we picked someone who turned out not to be so strong. And 6 months later, Ellen and I remember I don't remember so much the hiring, but I do remember the firing, and we worked on gently letting this individual go, but put us back at square one. Ellen, will you please step in and run this? Well, all right, I'll do it on a probationary basis. We'll see. I'm not sure I'm up to it. Well, that was the beginning, and the rest, as they say, is history. But that was Ellen stepping in and coming to the fore, and it was love right on through. She took over and really, by the next year or two, had the reins both for the organization and speaking nationally for us. So we'll move on.
So as Ellen grew NCCS, it became evident that her personality and her skills would serve NCCS well as a coalition that spoke for everyone with cancer. Her groundworking work at Date Able showed her true character, and it gave us a hint of what a compassionate and intelligent leader she would become. So even in the 1980s, Ellen did not see people as a victim, as a prostate or a breast cancer survivor, but she saw us all as individuals. And her reaction was always the same: what could I do to help? Although we had some pretty lofty aspirations beyond our extremely meager budgets, Ellen knew that we had to have partnerships to really to do some good work. So in 1996, she joined with her good friend Julia Rowland and helped inspire founding of the Office of Cancer Survivorship at NCI, which Julia will talk about. Well, the following year, Ellen appeared on the Larry King Show. And during a commercial break, Sam Donaldson and Larry King decided that Ellen should lead a march on Washington. So after recovering from the shock of what she had just been called upon to do, she brought together the march, Coming Together to Conquer Cancer. More than 250,000 people marched on the mall, and there were more than 200 events throughout the country, and the subsequent result was they raised an enormous amount of future funds for cancer research. So as a result, Ellen got a lot of publicity for NCCS, and she attracted celebrities and public officials to help the cause. Go back to that one just to say few people could ever say no to Ellen. But this sort of list of celebrities and public officials really never made a dent in her humility. Despite all these glossy photos, Ellen really devoted most of her time to NCCS, to that studious and arduous work of just becoming the expert in cancer policy. One of the things she had spearheaded was Lost in Transition, which was the Institutes of Medicine's evidence for future research and cancer care. She authored groundbreaking articles on cancer survivorship. She championed cancer survivorship care plans, and she really helped us change the lexicon from cancer victim, cancer patient, to cancer survivor.
So I had the good fortune to be invited by ASCO to keynote a recent conference, the first in what I think will be a permanent series on survivorship research that took place in mid-January in San Francisco. Now, I've been out of the main line of cancer survivorship policy and issues for some time, an avid camp follower, but not really involved in the details. So I took it upon myself to do some rapid homework and preparation. And of course, that meant getting to Ellen. So we scheduled a sit down that took place in late December. And actually, we did it by phone in the end. But we spent about 2 hours while she kind of schooled me in where we'd been for the last decade or so. So this turned out, in fact, to be, of course, unknown at the time, her valedictory statement, at least to me, of her thinking about where we stood in the movement. Fortuitously, I took good notes and have this to share, and I've picked out 5 or 6 phrases that I think form the pillars of Ellen's work and to some extent legacy, and I'll share those with you now. So this is a foundational principle of the survivorship movement, obviously, but survivorship is a condition of its own and deserves the attention, the the planning, the funding support, the public support, the policy support, the research support that is needed. And I think over the couple of decades, the 3 decades we've been functioning in this area, that the survivorship movement has seen that come to reality, not at the level we would all like, and I think Ellen's charge to us is continuing that. Let me get these all out of order. Sorry. It's running itself. I had to stop it. Yes, it speaks for itself. This was not an idle or a night job kind of thing. This is a day job, and that is that the system itself needs to accommodate survivorship and more broadly health equity and the issues involved in a broader sense of democratizing health care are key to making survivorship successful, not to say other elements of patient care, health care, and health successful. Every survivor should have a survivorship plan. This, of course, came to the front in the IOM report and is, in Ellen's judgment, struggling out into the oncology space and into the patient care space. Her sense was that more people are getting survivorship plans, but it's not the kind of absolute predictable element of cancer care that it should be. So a key element. This notion that getting doctors to move and getting the system to move is difficult and moves very slowly. This always gets a chuckle, but this is at core, I think, her observation and one that's very important. Keep upstaging myself here, so upstaging Ellen. So finally, this notion that the system denies death, falsely denies death. And I think this has been an element of the NCCS's vision, that it's not simply a question of sugarcoating the reality of cancer. Cancer is tough, and cancer has a good deal of mortality associated with it, and everyone with that diagnosis thinks quickly about that issue. And while we don't celebrate death or the unsuccessful outcome of treatment, it is part of life, and it's certainly part of cancer treatment. And our policies, as well as our hearts and our thoughts, need to embrace that in a kind and gentle way, but a realistic way. And our policies shouldn't be built around hopeless treatments or wasted efforts or painful and punishing efforts, but we should have a sense of appropriate treatment and appropriate life extension where possible, and palliative care as necessary when those don't work. So I think she left this with us, as she certainly felt it, lived it, and among the many wise things of her legacy, I think that's a strong one.
And just lastly, when Ellen first joined the NCCS board, she befriended a fellow board member and a fellow lymphoma survivor named Fred Youngman at the time. And Fred described being a cancer survivor as life as a millipede, waiting for the other 999 shoes to drop. And then in her nearly 45 years as a cancer survivor, Ellen personally witnessed many shoes drop as a result of her extensive treatment. But she never waited passively for the next diagnosis. She knew that millions of others shared the same experience. And she channeled all of her energy and her genius to teaching us, survivors, caregivers, family members, healthcare providers, how to prevent some of those shoes from dropping, and then what do you do when you can't prevent them, how do you address them? So in the past few years, of course, as more shoes dropped and Ellen's health began to decline, she tried to step back from NCCS and work part-time, which was, for her, was finally scaling back from 60 or 80 hours a week to 60 to 40, and eventually maybe to 30, which was to her not working. But it's because she loved the work. She was generous to a fault, and despite her personal challenges, Ellen never lost her altruistic drive, her passion to serve, and her love for all of us.
I am Richard Pazdur from the FDA. However, my comments have nothing to do about the FDA. In deciding what to talk about, I thought I would go through my emails, and I want to read to you the last email that Ellen sent to me. From Ellen Stovall, elstovall@gmail.com, sent Wednesday, November 25th, 2015. This was the day after my wife died, and it was to me at both my FDA address and my personal email account. Dear Rick, we're away for Thanksgiving with my family and back home on Saturday. Please don't hesitate to ask me to help with anything. I can run errands, bake things for the Tuesday's memorial service, or whatever you need. We have 3 empty bedrooms in our home, and we are happy to make them available to folks from out of town. Don't be shy about asking. Thinking of you, love, Ellen. Quintessential Ellen. An offer of help, an offer of kindness, an extension of a helping hand, but a practical Ellen. There are 2 Ellens that I would like to talk about, the public Ellen and the private Ellen, both of which I would like to discuss with you today. First, the public Ellen. Yes, President and Chief Executive of the National Coalition of Cancer Survivorship from 1992 to 2008. Later, Senior Healthcare Policy Advisor. The public Ellen. Yes, Ellen testified before Congress and was a member of the National Cancer Advisory Board of the NCI. Again, the public Ellen. Yes, Ellen, the founding member of the National Cancer Policy Board of the Institute of Medicine. Again, the public Ellen. Yes, Ellen, member of numerous advisory panels, working groups, and committees of the NCI, ASCO, AACR, and other professional organizations. Again, the public Ellen. I interacted with Ellen for the past 17 years in all of these capacities. These public interactions provided a forum for Ellen to teach us all about the patient. Ellen was the, quote, the patient voice before the phrase, the patient voice, became fashionable. Ellen was there to remind us that everyone, yes, everyone should be a patient advocate. That is, everyone should put the patient first. We should ask ourselves how each one of us can improve our processes, whether it's eliminating unnecessary administrative burdens, speeding up drug development, or simply advocating things, as Ellen would say, just so they get better. That was the public Ellen, a force in oncology. Now for the private Ellen. In the Roman Catholic Mass, there's a part of the ceremony called Prayers for the Faithful, where various petitions are requested, and after each petition, the congregation cites the refrain, Lord, hear our prayers. These petitions vary from requests for world peace, end of world conflicts, increased religious vocations to consecrated life, the health of the Pope when he travels to Mexico. But invariably, the final petition is for prayers to those who we hold in the silence of our heart. I've pondered that phrase and reflected on the phrase for many years, those who we hold in the silence of our hearts. When I was a young boy attending Mass on the south side of Chicago, this phrase had very little meaning to me. It only became important as I aged and actually suffered loss. To me, this phrase, to those who we hold in the silence of our hearts, speaks to those private interactions between 2 individuals. Yes, those personal conversations that only you and the other person value. These are the conversations that expose your vulnerability. These are the conversations, the acts of kindness, the helping hand that we remember about the people throughout our entire life. They frequently occur when we are in turmoil or emotional distress. One of my last interactions with Ellen was during the videotaping of an interview that was conducted for the 2015 NCCS Awards ceremony. This videotaping was moderated by Ellen, and it occurred in my home in Bethesda with my wife. This was approximately 2 months before my wife's demise from ovarian cancer and several months before Ellen's death. After the interview, both women, Ellen and my wife, sat on the couch in our living room and discussed what was important in their respective lives. However, it was not what was said, but what was not said during those conversations that I hold in the silence of my heart. Both knew their situations. Both accepted their situations. It was the love, the compassion, the understanding, the uncertainties of the future that only two people facing an end of life's journey could impart to each other. Ellen turned to my wife at the end of the conversation and asked her, "Mary, I wonder which one of us will cross the finish line of life first." Both women nervously laughed, knowing that they could not possibly continue this conversation. It was simply too dangerous. This is the private or personal Ellen, and this is the picture that I will always hold in the silence of my heart. During this afternoon, as we hear from people who knew Ellen, I challenge each one of you to reflect on your own interactions with the private Ellen and how you will hold her in the silence of your heart for the remaining years of your life. Thank you very much.